Hello, my name is Helena Darwin, and I'd like to talk to you today about a project that I've written called Doing Gender Beyond the Binary, a Virtual Ethnography, which is published in Symbolic Interaction. The inspiration for this project is simple. I noticed that even though there were increasing articles online explaining to people the unique challenges that non-binary people experience in their daily lives, that is, people who don't identify as man or woman, trans man or trans woman, but rather both or neither, or some different combination of gender altogether, that there wasn't really much happening in academia. Academia wasn't catching up with this virtual discourse and with this effort to educate the public. So, in order to fill this gap in the sociology of gender and also in transgender studies, I decided to turn to one of these virtual spaces, a Reddit community that's dedicated to the genderqueer identity. And the purpose of my investigation was rather simple. I wanted to identify the mechanisms that they develop to handle and negotiate their binary accountability, their accountability to this belief that there are two and only two genders. And how do they correct people? How do they visually signify their gender to people in a way that challenges this type of belief and effectively redoes gender, isn't just doing gender? And what I found was that there are many different ways of being non-binary. And not everyone within this genderqueer community felt very comfortable with the genderqueer label, even though they were participating within the community. And just as there are so many different ways of understanding gender and of experiencing their gender, there are just as many ways of trying to visually signify their gender to other people through asymmetrical hairstyles that are both feminine and masculine at the same time, through styles of dress that may be mixed binary gender cues, masculine with the feminine, various ways, whether they're trying to be androgynous and evade binary categorization, or play with gender and have binary signifiers of both polar extremes simultaneously. There are various ways that people thwart their binary categorization visually. And of course, not everybody feels a need to visually signify their gender identity and feel very strongly about wanting to make sure that it's still respected that they can have that gender identity without it being visible and political. And then finally, of course, there are other ways that people do their non-binary gender identity interactively, such as through pronoun specification, announcing that they would rather go by some alternative pronouns such as they or Z, etc., instead of going by he or she as people would ordinarily default to. And also coming out to people in their lives, which can be incredibly difficult for their loved ones who have to shift in relation to this coming out, whether that's a significant other who may suddenly have to question their sexual identity label if they had identified as lesbian or as gay, to suddenly grapple with the fact that their partner is not in fact the same sex or gender, however they understand that. And also, mothers and fathers and siblings struggle because the terminology that we use to refer to each other as our relationships are also very binary inflected, such as son, daughter, sister, brother, and having to shift. So, just as there are as many different ways to be non-binary, there are that many different ways to do non-binary gender, to do gender beyond the binary. And even though the results of this study are not simple, there isn't an easy black and white categorizational schema that I am presenting, so too is the point of this project that gender is not a black and white binary box system. And this is exactly why gender theorists would be well suited to spend more attention studying non-binary gender identities, especially if they want to understand how people can redo gender or undo gender and therefore contribute towards social change. I hope you enjoy my article.